right then, about 2 months in, over 160 something photos, some videos, some gaming, countless hours of TikTok. It's a terrible app. I love it. And I think I've finally formed an opinion. So let's start with the hardware. You know, it's a nice high-end looking phone, but quite frankly, it's pretty much the same thing we've seen for years now, and to me, it's gone a bit stale. Now, I like the color options they've given us, but I can't understand why they've given us a glossy finish on the morning mist color I've got here and a frosted finish on the pine green color, which looks awesome, by the way. Truth of the matter is, though, most people are using a case, like most of us always say, so at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter all that much, but I think the general consensus is frosted is greater than glossy. Now, it's a big phone, so button placement's kinda important. For right-handed people like myself, the power and alert slider are easily reachable with average-sized hands, but, and this is gonna sound super nitpicky, cause it is, the volume rocker's a little out of my reach unless I readjust. Really not a big deal, but still fairly annoying on a daily basis. So, bottom line, it's still a nice looking phone. Like, it'll still turn heads, but it just looks like so many other phones have for a long time now. The display's kinda disappointed me, but not for the reasons you might think. It's those goddamn curved edges. They just make it harder to find a good screen protector, especially tempered glass screen protectors, because they can't go right to the edge, otherwise they start separating from the display. And of course, but most importantly, false positive touches. Ugh. Now, I'll admit, OnePlus has done a really good job this time around through software to help prevent that, but it'll never truly go away until they flatten out those screens. Granted, I've had less false touches on the 9 Pro than previous generations, but I'm still getting them, and the fact of the matter is, most people prefer flat displays on their phones anyways. But regardless of all that, holy shit, man, this is a really nice display. 120Hz refresh, 1440p resolution, and a max brightness of 1300 nits, although third-party lab tests have shown it's closer to 1100. Nevertheless, color accuracy is bonkers. I think it gets something like 110% of the DCI P3 color gamut, which is really impressive, so it's fantastic for watching content or editing photos if that's something you do on your phone a lot. Of course, you still got the option to drop from 120Hz to 60Hz to save the battery, but to me, the viewing experience between 60 and 120Hz is like staggering, specifically when it comes to scrolling in any app. Like, I sincerely can't scroll for more than a few minutes when in 60Hz because I start to get nauseous, and that goes all the way back to before 90Hz phone displays became a thing. But as soon as I pop it into 120, I can scroll like forever and feel fine. But that does take a toll on battery life, not only because of a fast refresh rate, but also because I can consume for longer, right? Which is actually why I set the resolution to Full HD Plus while keeping the refresh rate at 120. But I'll get into that a little more shortly. By the way, before I move on from the display, the fingerprint reader location's been a silly topic of controversy. Should they have moved it up higher? Probably. Is it unusable and does it hinder my ability to unlock the phone in any meaningful way? No. And it still unlocks just as fast as it has from last year, although I haven't really noticed an increase in the consistency of accurate unlocks like others have claimed. I don't know, man, it's fine. It's an accurate enough fingerprint reader for me not to complain about. But touching on battery life, even after all this time with updates and allowing the system to learn my usage habits, the 4,500 milliamp hour capacity that you'd think would carry you comfortably through a day just barely seems to cut it, at least for me. This is a one-day phone, not a day-and-a-half phone, a one-day phone, but it really depends on your device settings. For example, with the resolution set at 1440p and the refresh rate at 120Hz with display brightness usually sitting around 80 to 90%, I get an average of about 4.5 hours of screen on time, sometimes pushing it to 5. But with the resolution set to 1080p and the refresh set to 60 with auto brightness enabled, I was able to get up to a little over 7 hours. But like I mentioned before, I just can't do 60Hz, so as sort of a middle ground, I left auto brightness on, set the refresh to 120, but kept the resolution at 1080, and I pretty consistently saw 5.5 to 6 hours of screen on time, which is decent. But like always, it completely depends on what exactly it is you're doing with your phone, right? Having said that, OnePlus does provide a 65-watt warp charger in the box. This thing charges the 9 Pro from 0 to 100% at a stupid fast 30 minutes. So when I wake up and have next to no battery life left, I throw it on the charger, have a coffee and a shower, and before I'm done, it's already fully charged. It's pretty incredible. Now, unless you're running a super entry-level Android device, I don't think daily performance has been an issue with Android for several years now, especially not with high-end devices like this one. These days, it really all boils down to the UI and settings. I've always really liked OnePlus's Oxygen OS because of both the customization freedom OnePlus gives us, but also because there isn't an overwhelming amount of completely useless settings options to pore over, like a bloody university textbook on physics, as we used to see with Samsung Galaxy phones. Now, if you're into mobile gaming but aren't really interested in those dedicated gaming phones, man, the 9 Pro should still be a pretty solid choice, because in addition to the 120Hz refresh, which by the way, not a lot of games support, you've got that Snapdragon 888, 12 gigs of RAM, and 2-lane UFS 3.1 internal storage, which is like, well, it's really fast. Every game I played loaded fast and ran flawlessly with whatever graphics settings the developers offered set to their max. There is this gaming app from OnePlus that you can use to further customize your gaming experience with, and includes further do not disturb settings and a few performance enhancements. But you can also set your games to pro gaming mode, which enables both advanced do not disturb, which is essentially a hard fuck off mode, as well as enable an enhanced process regulator mode for even better performance. Or so they say. Honestly, I gamed with pro gaming on and off. I couldn't tell a bloody difference. Maybe if I cared enough to benchmark with it, I could see a numerical difference, but I doubt it's tangible enough to where you'd actually need to run games with it enabled to get the experience you're looking for, you know what I mean? Look, it's got a Snapdragon 888 and 8 or 12 gigs of RAM, dude, you'll be fine. And if you do game on it, or watch a lot of content for that matter, the speakers get plenty loud and still sound great. I mean, you could nitpick that like the Galaxy S21 Ultra has slightly deeper lows, or the iPhone 12 Pro Max can get slightly louder, but I mean, they're flagship phone speakers. The differences between them are almost negligible. The prices, however, aren't. Now, like I said at the beginning of the video, I've taken a lot of photos over the past 12 months, and there's been quite a few software updates with almost every single one including some sort of improvement or fix to the cameras. So, let's start from the beginning. OnePlus announces their new 9 Pro and makes this big deal about their new partnership with Hasselblad, right? Okay, cool. So, early reviewers get it in, test it out, and find that there's some discrepancies with things like the autofocus, colors, and white balance, specifically the differences between the main 48 megapixel camera compared to the 50 megapixel ultra-wide and 8 megapixel telephoto. Okay, well here's the deal. The main shooter is the Sony IMX789. This is the camera that Hasselblad had a helping hand with, although from what I could find, it was only with the color science, the Pro Mode UI, and like nothing else. The other two cameras are Sony's IMX766 sensors, and from what I could tell based on all the information I could gather, Hasselblad didn't have anything to do with those two cameras. So when you see color and white balance differences between the Hasselblad camera and the other two, like these two shots with the main and telephoto cameras where the grass basically changes from green to blue, it's not on Hasselblad. It's on OnePlus for not matching the colors. The worst part is, even after 2 months of camera updates, this still hasn't been corrected, as you can see with these pictures in my living room where there's a lot of white and plenty of natural light. So when we take a closer look at the color chart, while the telephoto and ultra-wide share more similar colors, all three still produce different colors, but with the telephoto and ultra-wide having slightly higher saturation and the main shooter having the most accurate colors out of the three. Now, having said all that, these are still great cameras. We still get some fringing around the edges that are easier to notice on close-ups, but I think dynamic range is good, colors are good, highlight roll-off is decent, shadow roll-off can be a bit sharp, but there's still plenty of detail, and skin tones look great. Same with the 16 megapixel selfie camera. It does have a slower f2.4 aperture that the main camera does, but still I'm perfectly happy with it. I'm still seeing it struggle in the woods with fine details like tree branches and everything else you normally find in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, but if you're creative with your shots and not just taking your typical boring scenery photos, they can turn out looking pretty nice. Now, the autofocus has gotten better, but it's still hunting a lot on objects it shouldn't struggle with. And I found that the main shooter switches to the ultra-wide camera's macro mode automatically too quickly, as in it switches to macro mode when I don't want or need it, which gets super annoying. Yeah, you can toggle it off when it happens, but there's no way to just prevent it from doing that to begin with. By the way, that ultra-wide camera, best ultra-wide I've ever shot with thanks to that freeform lens OnePlus tacked on. I personally hate that fisheye effect from other ultra-wides, so the freeform lens is a super underrated feature. Okay, so let's say I was heavy into mobile photography, or I'm like an Instagrammer, for example. This would not be on my top 5 list of phones to look at. I'd probably gravitate to something like the S21 Ultra, something from Huawei, or the iPhone 12 Pro Max. But those phones do cost more, and depending on the phone, a lot more. So if I was looking for a phone with performance, user customization, and a clean interface in mind first, the 9 Pro would 100% be on my top 5 list of phones to consider. So if you currently own a 9 Pro, I'd love to know your thoughts so we can sort of compare notes, if you will. And if you don't own one, let me know what you think about my experience and opinions so far, and if this is the phone you're gonna go with. Or not. Anyways, I think that's gonna do it for this one. I really hope you liked the video. If you did, maybe let me know by tapping that like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my new videos. But thanks, as always, for watching, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Cheers.